in the relationship between teachers, language assessment literacy, and social justice. As a workshop facilitator, I will be walking teachers through a hands-on approach through the design of assessment instruments that promote language learning and, most importantly, support social justice. Being an ASOCOPI member and participating in this year's conference bring benefits that are best enjoyed when experienced. So, see you in October in La Arenosa. Bye-bye.
Well, so we are very happy to have these testimonials. We had Jimmy. Jimmy was our plenary speaker. As I said, he's a school teacher. And as I also mentioned, we had Frank. Frank is one of our plenary speakers this year. He's an expert in assessment, and this year assessment for social justice joined us in Barranquilla this year. But let's wait no more. It is about time to talk about what got us here today. And I want to give a warm welcome to Colombia here in our association, to Amanda. Dr. Amanda Minillo is a professional learning specialist for Advanced More Learning, who's one of our partners this year with ASOCOPI. We have been working really hard for having Amanda also here with us. Amanda joined Taban after working as a district K-12 world language and dual language immersion teacher, supporting specialists. She started her career as a high school French teacher and has experience in K-12 instruction and adult learning. So you have been in all levels of schools, Amanda. Amanda is also certified as instructional coach and has led curriculum writing teams and supported districts in developing professional learning to meet their program needs. Amanda works with professionals in the field to support language learning programs and instructional practices through Advanced More Learning. Amanda, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us. And now,
it's great to be here.
It's all yours.
All right, my friends. So in the chat, you guys are going to see a note catcher document, and it just has links. If you're curious and want to keep any of the resources I'm sharing with you today, that note catcher will let you do that. It will ask you to make a copy, but that copy is for you. So please feel free to keep that for your own records. All right, so I'm gonna make sure that I can see you guys and can see the chat, and we're gonna go ahead and get started. I'm so excited to be here with you guys today. Thank you for having me. Today, what we're going to be looking at is the Proficiency Playbook. So these are practices that I have found and research has found that improve student language outcomes. And as Adriana said, and I'm not going to read my resume to you because she did such a great job introducing me, I have had experience in the K through 12 and even 16 classroom. So any of these things that I show you today, if you have questions of what that looks like in your classroom, please, please, please make sure to ask me if you need any clarification. If you also want to reach out, I love supporting teachers. That is my passion. So please feel free to email me at any time. And let's go ahead and get started. So what I would love you to do is think of a story. Think of a time when you needed to speak in a language you weren't completely proficient in. So you were struggling getting your point across. What were you trying to say? How did you struggle? And what new word did you learn through the process? So what was a time when you were struggling communicating, and did you learn a new word from it? If so, I would love for you to put in the chat, what word did you learn from your experience, from that story where you were struggling to speak? What was the one word that you ended up learning to say?
Okay, let's give our teachers some seconds, see what words come to their mind.
And while y'all are doing that, I'm going to tell you my story. So think about your word and put it in the chat. So let me tell you the story, the tragic story of a bee. One time I was studying abroad in France and I was living with a host family. It was a beautiful spring day. and there was a window, and I opened the window to my bedroom. Along came a bee and entered the bedroom where I was staying with the host family. That sweet bee approached a lamp and caught fire. In that moment, I knew I needed to run downstairs and I needed to get my point across. I needed to tell my host family that there was a fire in the room, but I did not know how to say the word bee. From that moment forward, there is one word I never forgot, and that is the word for bee. So what I'd love for you to do is put in the chat, what was your word? What was something you tried to communicate and you're like, oh, now I know how to say that word, and I didn't know how to do it before. So Edgar, also French, was personne. The word almost was Adriana. Anyone else?
Let's see our 34 teachers who have joined us so far. Schedule, says Adriana Paez. Oh, that's a hard one for Spanish speakers.
That is.
All right, who else has another word? Maybe maybe you cannot tell the whole story as Amanda did, but look, we have more schedules here.
Yeah, more with schedule. Oh, that's interesting. That's funny. Well, and so what I want us to think about is what can we learn from this story? Because many of us have had a similar experience. We had a story and we learned a word out of our encounter with language. So what can we learn? So what can we learn? We are able to tell the proficiency playbook. And so that's what we're going to look at today. Oh, someone says some or any. I was only 6 years old and they were the same. Yeah, absolutely. And so what we can learn is languages are learned in a certain way. They are learned when we have experience where we get to talk and we have to use the language in a meaningful context. But then they're also learned when we're able to reflect and think about what don't we know, and able to reflect and move forward with our language ability. And so what that is we're going to look at how does that happen? What do we know about research, and how do we leverage those experiences in the classroom? So let's start with how learners receive language. How do we take in language? So what do we know about language? We have to be exposed to language, and we know that as comprehensible language. So language that is slightly more challenging than we already know. And what we're going to do, we're going to maybe hear people talking. We're going to read books. We're going to see things on the internet. We're exposed to language throughout life, right? Music, videos. Maybe in the classroom, we see things on the walls. We're reading, we're hearing, we're seeing all of this language. But then something interesting happens. So we have all this language outside, but we have to take it in. The first thing is we have to feel safe. If we do not feel safe, then we cannot take in language. If our anxiety is high, we cannot take in language. So I asked myself, do I feel safe? Do I feel safe in the classroom to take risk? If so, I may take in some language. If not, I won't take anything in. If I feel safe, I then, as a student, get to decide what information I want to take in, which is a lot. As a teacher, you could be doing flips, you could be doing cartwheels, you can have the whole circus in front of the class. But if the student is not interested in it, then they are not going to take it in. So they get to decide what they're interested in. So they may ask themselves, is the language relevant to my needs and to my interests? And based off of that, I am going to develop a theory. So let's say, for example, Adriana is the teacher and she keeps saying, je m'appelle Adriana, je m'appelle Adriana. So if I feel safe in the classroom, I may hear her saying this a lot. And I'm going to decide, and she looks at me and she says, comment tu t'appelles? And I'm realizing, oh no, I'm going to have to use this language. And so I'm sitting there thinking, okay, it's relevant. I'm going to have to say something. And so I'm going to develop a theory. If I say, je m'appelle grass, then I know that that's not right. So the thing is, so I'm going to take in the language and I have to organize a theory based off of what I'm hearing around me. I need to feel safe to absorb new language. Absolutely. So what do we know from this? Just this first part of language acquisition. How do we take in language? If the conditions are not right, the game cannot start. So just like the soccer game, if there's lightning on the field, if we don't feel safe, we can't play the game. So the first thing, language input has to be part of the environment. You have to have a soccer ball to play soccer. You have to be exposed to language and you have to be exposed to it a lot. So we say 90% of the time, if you are teaching English, 90% of the time you are speaking in English and you have the walls, whatever text you have, 90% has to be in English because they need the language to be able to teach it or to take it in. So that language is comprehensible. So it's at a level that they can understand. It is relevant to their interest and it's accessible because there's a lot of it. The other thing, again, students have to feel safe. So they are motivated and feel safe to take risk, to use the language purposefully. So they feel safe that it is okay to make mistakes, which is part of the language learning journey. So if we know comprehensible input is one of those big factors, what is comprehensible input? So it is input that is adapted to the abilities of the learners. So in order to do this, we have to know what is the ability of our learner and what is slightly more challenging because we want them to have the motivation and the curiosity to take in the language. So it needs to be slightly more challenging, but not too challenging. And that's going to come, again, that comprehensible input is the language we're exposing them to. So you speaking, if they're listening to native speakers, we're picking native speakers for them to listen to that's appropriate, authentic resources, all of it is just slightly more challenging than what they can do. And we call that I+1 for those of us who know the research. So let's talk about it. Put in the chat, what can we do as teachers to make language comprehensible? So what are some things that we do as teachers to make sure we are understood?
Arnulfo, for example, is saying that he liked the expression, I need to feel safe to absorb new language. Now, teachers, what are those things we do to make our message comprehensible? I think that while they reply in the chat, because our teachers are going to be very active, I have to say that my son, when I talk to him, he says, Mommy, you're not teaching, stop moving your hands. So I think that we use a lot of our body language, our hands and our face, and we overact. And for example, Edward is telling us that he considers the pace of learners. Christina says that she uses pictures and body language. And Samsung, not kidding. And another participant says that he considers students' context.
Yes, absolutely. And so we're a jack of all trades. We are doing all of the things in front of the classroom. You're drawing, you're pointing to things, you're acting out. These are the things that we have a superpower as teachers, right? That we are coming to the classroom and we are able to meet the needs of our students by doing these things to make the language comprehensible. Absolutely. Realia, well, yes, we're showing them real things. So when you're talking about, in the United States, when we're talking about an arepa, they're making arepas, right? And we're showing pictures of them and we're not just like speaking, we're having those visuals and the tangible objects. So what's important to note, because some people will say, oh, Amanda, I have learners who are not too advanced. How and why would I speak and stay in the language 90% of the time? So what you'll notice is the less comprehensible language that students have that goes in, it's going to go through all of this process and this filtering, the less comprehensible output that will come out of their mouths. So we need to be given as much language as possible. So once it goes through the filtering, that they're actually producing some language that is comprehensible. Oh, move, negotiate for meaning. I see some more in there. Sketch noting. Those are awesome. So if we know we have to do 90% of the time in the language, how do we still make students feel safe? Because it can be intimidating. If the teacher's talking a language that we're not too familiar with, it can be intimidating. So what are we going to do? You have visuals everywhere. And I know some of us, we don't own the class, like we can't decorate our classrooms. If that's the case, then in their notebooks, you have these visuals. They need those visuals. So you'll see here in the United States, when kids are in the dual language immersion program, we have pictures and they have their Spanish there that they're learning. If we're teaching activities, we have a word wall. We have these types of things with the visuals and the text, the question words so that they can use them in class, and they're encouraged to speak and ask those questions in class to get around. But what's really important to note is we do this, not this. What is the difference between these two images?
The visual.
So we have the visuals. We have one more thing that makes the other one a no-no.
Meaning also, I mean,
Yeah, it
it's
provides
not
more
translation, it's you're providing meaning.
Yes. So we do not translate those visuals because that insults our students' intelligence. It's really, it's crippling them, right? It's crippling their ability to do that productive struggle to understand things. So I can look at this picture and I can tell that faire du camping means to camp, right? I don't need the English and the French together, right? So when you guys are teaching English, for example, we're not putting the Spanish with it. Just put the English because they can look at the visuals and they can tell, and our brain actually has to work harder to look at the translations that way. Another way for students to feel safe, which we see all the time in elementary schools, but also is really good for our upper levels as well, is having a predictable classroom. So you do things in the same manner every single day. So maybe you have a routine when students come into the classroom. You have something that you do in the middle, and then you wrap it up in the same way. And by having predictability, students' anxiety goes down. So they feel safe because they know what the routine is, even if they don't know the language. And then also what we encourage is things like chat mats. Have we heard of chat mats before? So the idea with chat mats is you can have a mat, like a dinner placemat that has words on it on their desk. And so when students are encouraged to talk, they have the text there. They have the things that can help them talk about what they've read or to say that they agree or disagree. And you can make your chat mat based off of whatever language that is important for that unit. Repetition, absolutely.
And these are called in many different ways. We have heard, for example, prompts. But this chat mat is really nice.
Absolutely. And so the idea is with a chat mat or whatever we're calling it, you have those sentence starters. So you start the sentence for them so that they can look and they say, I read that, and then they could fill in the blank. And so they're empowered because they're given the beginning and it helps them with the thinking, it helps them with the language. Any questions about those?
Teachers, remember that you can always write on the chat, or when Amanda asks questions, you can also open your microphones. This is looking good. I think that everybody's just busy making notes, you know?
I love it.
I am.
So now it's time to play. So we know that it's a safe environment. The field is ready to go. Like we can now get started with language. So we have to ask our questions. Where are we starting? And what is the goal? Where are we going? And so I always like to think, have you ever seen a little kid who plays soccer and then they accidentally turn around and score in their own goal? So the idea is we want to know where we're starting and we need to know where we're going in order to decide what those steps are in the middle. And so where are we starting? What's the goal? And then the playbook is going to be, how do we move from the first to the second? How do we get them from the start to the goal? So the idea is, if we don't know where we're going, we'll never get there, right? So we have to know where we're trying to get students. And so that is where you guys are going to use your CEFR standards, because we have proficiency. And so we know how proficiency grows. So I look at it, and for example, I see, maybe I'm saying my kids can understand phrases and they can understand the main point when they hear things. And so I know that that might be a starting point. So I have to ask myself, where are they now? Where are they going? So if I look at the CEFR standards, I see it says I can read short, simple text with predictable information, such as advertisements. And so that tells me the types of text I'm going to choose for my students. So if that is where my students may be performing and what I need them to be doing, I'm going to pick texts that are appropriate. And so it tells you in the CEFR what types of text to choose. So for example, if I am having students learn about adjectives, like let's say they need to learn how to describe things. So I know they're going to be able to read something that is short, simple, with predictable information. So maybe I would have them read an adoption website, because the text on adoption website would be short and simple. And so the idea is I'm creating a real world task that aligns with the goal. So I'm not going to just tell students, write a list of adjectives. Make these adjectives agree to a noun, but I'm going to give them a motivation, a purpose to doing it. So the context then would be, your local shelter needs help finding homes for some animals. Help these animals find a family. And so they're going to read that website to learn about the animals, to figure out which family they could go to. And so you'll notice the task then is a communicative task, because we know if the purpose is to communicate in language, we should be reflecting that in the classroom. So just the same, if I'm looking at what do I want my students to produce, if I'm looking at an A2, it says I can write short and simple notes with very simple personal information. I can communicate on familiar topics. So maybe when I ask them to do something, maybe their spoken interaction would be ask and answer questions with your friend about their family and which animals they're interested in. Do you like this animal or do you like this animal? Maybe when they're writing, they're going to write and create an adoption flyer to advertise for those animals that don't have homes. And so again, they're able to take this language and use it in a meaningful way that would be in the real world. But that's a great goal, right? How do we support students getting there? So yes, this sounds great. Like, let's get them talking about animals. Let's get them reading websites. How do we get them there?
Yeah, because one thing is what we expect our students to do, and like what is our expectation versus, I mean, like expectation versus reality.
Exactly.
And I would say another thing is like how we plan that to happen. Because sometimes we just say that, okay, I have the goal, but what do I have to do as a teacher?
Exactly. And I'm so glad that you guys are thinking that, because what we do is, now that we know the goal, we say what words, what language chunks would a student need to be able to do this. So put in the chat, what are some things that a student would need to be able to do that? What are some words, some phrases that they would need to be able to say? And let's see if we think the same, because on the next page I have the answers.
Ooh. Answers on the next page, teachers. What do you think? What language would our students need for achieving that goal? Go ahead and let us know in the chat. So remember, the goal is there, the interaction is there, the writing is there. What are the language chunks? Who's going to be our first teacher to answer in the chat? Or you can open your microphones as well. They're shy today, Amanda. They're shy. They're usually very talkative. Teachers are talkative. Come on, guys.
That's okay too.
Pet vocabulary.
Yes, great start. We have to know the names of the pets.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Avoid isolated nouns and give like noun phrases. Very good, Stella. Thank you.
Yes, Stella, absolutely. So let's see, what do we think?
There you are.
So you guys said, so maybe some noun phrases. So maybe some of the verbs, they're going to have to see adopt, to like, to love, to prefer, right? And so as the teacher, if you're struggling doing this, what we do is do the task yourself. What language would you need to do that task? And so we see adjectives like playful and young. And then, like Stella said, we're not going to just stick with just random words because that's just a vocabulary list, but we're going to give them those functional chunks. What is your family like? How many blank? Do you prefer this or this? How often? And so you would sit there and you would come up with these, and these would lead what we put in the instruction, what we practice with them in class. We're thinking through that language ahead of time. So again, if you're struggling thinking of the language students need, do the task. So on your note catcher, you should see, and if you don't, I can put it in the chat later, the website as well. So if you're looking for an English website for pet adoption, I should have that on there for you. A template to organize the information. I love that, Stella.
Mari Ramirez sent a message, but probably she sent it, you sent it direct as a direct message, Mary, so I'm gonna read it. It says, I would teach them there is, there are, to give them an idea that there is a list of requirements of what a house of the family to adopt needs to have.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, that's awesome. So we know the goal, we kind of know the language that we're gonna be supporting them. Now is the fun part. Now we get to like get them there, right? So we have to look at Playbook Part 2. So we know how they're going to receive the information, but how are we going to get them to produce it? So remember, we're taking in the language. We may filter it. Then we're going to decide, am I interested in what they're saying? And then I'm going to organize a theory based off of what I hear. But now what's really important is I have to test out my theory. So if I hear Adriana saying, je m'appelle Adriana, je m'appelle Adriana, I have to test out my theory. So I have to have an opportunity in class to say, je m'appelle Amanda. And if it comes out understandable, so I notice based off of people, do they understand me? And if they understand me, that is comprehensible. We did it. We met the goal. But again, so important. Do I have the opportunity to speak and practice my theory in class? Because what if they don't understand me? Then that's limited output. That means I didn't meet the goal. And if I didn't meet the goal, I didn't meet what I thought was being said, then I have to go back to my comprehensible input, and I have to go back and revisit my language and go through the process again to test out the theory. So the idea is by noticing if people understand me, I either take in the language or I have to go back and I have to practice and figure out a way to get my point across. So the question a kid is going to ask, do I have opportunities to use the language in class? That's going to be really important. If we have to test out our theories, we have to have the opportunities to use the language. But what's really important is the language must be used meaningfully, in a relevant, real-world way. So the idea in the classroom, we're not giving students a tennis racket to play soccer, right? We're not having them read about soccer to play soccer. We have to have them play soccer. Just the same, we have to have students do language. So we have to think, why do we language? Like, what is the purpose? Why do we language? And then that needs to be what we do in the classroom. So if the purpose of reading is to get new information, to entertain ourselves, to connect ideas on the page to what we already know, or if you have that family member like me, I have a family member who loves to prove people wrong. You say, oh, the sky is blue. He'll say, no, no, I'll Google it and I'm going to prove you wrong. That is a purpose for reading and listening. Yes, language functions. How do we function in language? So the idea is if that's what we're reading, then we're going to be doing that type of thing in the classroom. If the purpose of writing is to express needs, wants, desire, to persuade people, to build relationships, to inform others, to exchange ideas, that is what we're doing in the classroom. So everything we do in the classroom should be with a purpose to do language, to communicate. So when you're asking yourself for the purpose, if we're creating activities for the students, we ask ourselves, does it simulate? Does it seem like natural real world language? Is it something we would see in the real world? Is it for communication purposes? And really importantly, does it require exchanges of unknown information? And so, how are we going to make those activities purposeful? We're going to prioritize relevant practice. If we know we want students to ask and answer questions with the partner about what animals they like, we can't do this. We can't do verb conjugation charts. That's not the most relevant practice. We need to be practicing asking and answering questions. But again, great goals. How are we going to do it? You have to model. So as a teacher, I am going to do some practice with questions, and I'm going to show what questions and answers look like. And then I'm going to do it with somebody else, and we're going to do it as a class. And then eventually we kick the bird out of the nest and we have to let them do it on their own. So what could that look like? Here is an example of the input I would provide. This is my pet, Stella. She is a dog. Stella lives in Norway. She is medium-sized and short hair. Stella loves the snow. So I've created a meaningful and interesting, if my students like me, they want to know about me, right? And they have a picture. And I've got the text here. So I did that. Stella has a lot of energy and loves dog sledding. So I'm doing that. And then I'm going to start asking kids in class. So now we have a context. You're conducting a survey for school to see what pets your classmates like. So I start asking students, again, we're now at the we do. So we're going to, it's not just teacher doing, now we're going to do it as a class. So I might ask Oscar and say, Oscar, which animal do you have? And I have these sentence frames for Oscar if he needed it, where he could say, I have, I do not have, and then they have it here. So again, this is a beginner learner. You would adapt how much structure and how much support you provide based on the learners. But so now we're giving the opportunity for students to ask and answer. But again, what was the purpose of asking and answer the questions? Maybe they're going to summarize the results. There's a survey. So write a summary of the interviews. 8 people have dogs. Jose has a cat, but Sarah has a lizard. And again, sentence starters for those beginners. This number of people have this, so-and-so has a, and so we can provide those supports for them. And then one more thing that we could do is, this is my students' favorite game, if you're looking for a fun game, have any of you ever played a game called Taboo? So this is my
Yeah.
So this is my students' favorite game. This is my family Thanksgiving game. So the idea is I'm gonna have a word and on the board, and that one student can see it and their partner cannot. So you'll have a partner A and a partner B. Partner A has to get partner B to guess the word, but they're not allowed to say any of the taboo words. So I can describe and identify animals. So if that is the can do statement, we have to provide them a meaningful practice. So partner A would describe this word to partner B, but they could not say any of these words. So would we like to try it? I just need 2 volunteers to unmute, and you're just going to describe the animal to somebody who's not allowed to look.
Okay, let's see. Who do we have here who can do it for us? Who wants to open your microphone and play a little bit with us? Shall we select a volunteer?
Okay, Mary, thank you. All right, I have Mary. Do I have one more person?
No entiendo qué es esto. ¿Qué es lo que están haciendo?
Let's see. I can do it if you don't have
Okay,
enough volunteer.
perfect.
I can be the one not looking.
Okay, so Adriana is not gonna look. Mary, I just need you to unmute, and you are gonna see the screen, and you are gonna describe to Adriana, who is then gonna have to guess. Are you ready? Just unmute when you're ready.
I'm ready.
All right, so you want her to guess this animal, but you cannot say these 2 words. Go ahead and unmute and talk.
Hi, so this is a green animal. It's usually found in Cuba. There is a movie of bad boys that they have one of them. And we have in Colombia, we don't have this kind of animals a lot, but we have a little version of them that is usually on the walls.
Okay.
If you think you know, Adriana, you can guess whatever you think you know.
I was thinking an iguana, but we have plenty of those here. So I think maybe a salamander.
Close.
Yeah.
A lizard.
A lizard.
Mhm.
There you go. Good job.
I
And
thought about iguana first, but we have plenty of those here. Good. Fun.
I love it. And so the idea again, guys, so you can see she wasn't allowed to say these words, but notice it's a meaningful activity because if we want them to describe, they need to describe. So we would then switch, and then Adriana would maybe describe a turtle. And then what you could do, because for some of our students, they don't need, the taboo is too much. They could just get the other student to guess the picture, right? And so the idea is if we want students to be able to describe animals, we're giving them opportunities to describe in class. So keep in mind, that was an information gap activity. What does that mean, an information gap activity? And you can put in the chat or you can unmute. What is an information gap activity?
An information gap activity. What do you think it is, guys? What is an information gap activity? Teachers or Jay-Z?
Thank you. So it basically it's usually done in pairs, and then one student has part of the information, and then the other student has the other part, and they need to ask questions to each other to, let's say, complete a table or to complete a paragraph. Yeah.
Absolutely, and that's spot on. So like he said, it's one person has information that the other person does not. So it's an exchange of unknown information. And that is way more fun and way more meaningful for a student than if I showed the whole class this one picture and I said, describe it, right? Because the idea is we want that intrigue and motivation to be there. We're learning from each other, and there's a purpose to exchange the information. So keep in mind that we had a purpose, we knew our goals, we had a purposeful practice that reflected what we expect them to do. And then we need to provide the opportunity for them to reflect and notice their language. And so what I want to encourage you guys is when we provide feedback, that we provide an opportunity for students to notice language, to acquire it. So how are we going to do that? We keep it actionable. We let them know that errors are okay. Only the most advanced of students are going to be perfect, right? So errors are okay. We're looking for meaning, not perfection. And we're going to use proficiency, your CEFR standards, to help with our feedback. So instead of this, which is what I used to do, I used to give feedback like this, and it used to take me hours. And I was so proud of myself on that feedback that I gave students. And on the way out the door, they would crumble that piece of paper and toss it out in front of me. And you're like, no, why are you doing that? I spent so much time on that feedback. So instead of that type of feedback, let's start giving feedback where we highlight areas that they need to notice, where we say, great job doing, because great job goes on mama's fridge. We say, pay attention to this, and I'm going to give you 1 or 2 goals. 1 or 2 goals a student will pay attention to. A whole paper of marks, they're not going to pay attention to. And so, again, use your CEFR proficiency ratings. So I can say, hey, this is what you did a great job of. You can describe simple terms. But what I want you to start trying to improve, try to describe your experiences. Tell me a story, right? And so you can use that to help with your feedback. Another thing you can do is you can just simply say, this is what I noticed you can do. So maybe they were having a conversation. Great job with your question formation. Great job self-correcting when you made errors. Great job being creative in your response. But maybe try this. And I put avoid English. Y'all would put avoid Spanish. You want your kids to speak English if you're teaching English, but avoid your native language. Listen to your partner and react to them. Ask follow-up questions. And so these are actionable steps that are way more meaningful than us spending hours and hours. And so with that said, my friends, I promised I would give you guys time for questions. So here we are. That was a lot of information, but it's just a brief little overview of that practice to proficiency. What questions do we have?
Amanda, this is so insightful. I am sure that our teachers have questions, or at least comments, or they're making tons of notes, because we have been having this discussion for a long time. Like, how is it that we can encourage our students not only to receive, but also to show us what they're learning? And definitely filling the gaps is not an option anymore, or teaching for listening, speaking, reading, and writing. We need to move towards language functions. And this is fun, and this is what we are here for. This is what languages are for. So any questions or comments? What do you guys say? What do you say? What do you think? Tell us questions, opinions. I want to hear you. I want to read you.
Oh, I see. With the topic you provided, I do give students the task of thinking of a list of things they have in their house. Yes, I love that you said that, Mary, because that's the way we make people feel safe, right? So if we activate what they already know, we're saying, hey, what do you know on this topic? Let's start with that, because you feel confident. That's a way for them to be successful before they go in. I love that example. So they're coming and they're thinking about things that they have in their house. A big yard, yes. And then it's also a way for us to explore culture, right? So maybe you have them reading about these adoptive pets, and maybe, you know, yards or houses and yards are different in Colombia versus in Florida. And so maybe you're going to have that opportunity for culture by doing that too. So Mary, that's a great question. When I do these types of activities, I do them with the novice learners. And so A1 or A2, those are some of your novice learners. It really depends on what you're expecting for them to do, right? So are you expecting them to provide a list? If they're going to be doing lists and things like that, I believe you guys have that in your, let me look at my thing, you guys, because y'all have different national standards than we do. So if they're writing a short, simple list, that's going to be your A2. And things like that. So it really kind of just depends, because it is something we can take one activity and we can adapt it to be multiple levels depending on what we ask of the students and maybe how challenging the text is that you're choosing.
Adriana is saying that it's challenging to work with 40+ students sometimes in a classroom, especially in public settings, right?
Yes, Adriana, that's a great example. And what I typically tell people, and what I try to do is do low prep activities. So do an activity where maybe like with the taboo, if you had the picture there, you break them into individual pairs. And so every kid is going at the exact same time rather than waiting for all to go through all 40 doing it. You would have them all go at the same time and you just walk back and forth. But you're right, it is challenging with groups of 40, and that's lots of love having a group of 40.
Claudia is also saying that it takes it reinforces the idea that languages need to be meaningful and situated. It's not easy. It requires teacher who knows what to do, when to go, where to go, and understands the needs of their students, learning outcomes, and also emotional aspects. What you said, we need to have the field ready for them.
Absolutely. Oh, and I see we have a question. Is it okay to use native language with starters? Yes. And this is what I would say. So I argue that when we, like, for example, if we're thinking about reading with native language, look for infographics, because those have lots of pictures, lots of visuals, and kids feel successful and excited. Like if you have your students read something that's meant for students in Florida in the United States, like they're like, oh my gosh, I did it. And so they feel that success, they feel that motivation. Same thing with native language. The thing with native language, though, make sure it's comprehensible, that you're pairing it with visuals. So we're having native language, maybe it's commercials, maybe it's videos, making sure that they have that access. Great question.
Amanda, this was amazing. Probably we should organize something else, like a live or something, for us to keep the conversation going.
I love it.
Mary says, it is challenging to bring real context to the classroom, but it's nice to hear from you. That is the only way to make it meaningful. And remember the topic after the bell rings. That's right.
Yes. And Mary, what I encourage people to do, because it is challenging, but what I started doing is I just started following like Instagram accounts, Twitter accounts, like whatever it is, so that my normal feed started populating, where you can like, you'll just get random text and you'll be like, oh, this is an article I could use in the classroom. But yes, it's going to be a lot of cultivating and building that up. But guys, I live in the United States. So if you teach English, reach out to me if you're looking for something, because I have access to that type of stuff. Reach out anytime. French, I've cultivated things for that too. I hear that there are some French teachers in here. So definitely reach out anytime. This is my contact information.
And as Claudia is saying, we need to build a community of practice. That's why we invite you all to keep being part of these moments in which we can meet with other teachers, in which we can share our expertise. There are so many opportunities now that we have this internet access to webinars and to talk together and to visit each other. Please follow Dr. Amanda Minillo. Check on Avant More Learning. In Avant More Learning, we have so many resources, and now we're partnering with them because they're awesome. I mean, since the moment I met Evan, my students are doing so much better with their assessment as well. And Camila says, I want to thank you for discussing feedback. This will help students view feedback as an opportunity for growth rather than a criticism towards them. That's something that happens to us, right? I mean, like we grew up with a vision of evaluation, assessment, and feedback that is punishment.
Yes, absolutely. And I encourage people, remember your standards say I can. So really emphasize those things. When you're giving that feedback, let them know what that standard they're meeting where it says I can. I love that, Camilla. That's a great feedback.
All right, Amanda, and since our teachers have been so diligent being here, what if we give them a free pass as an attendee for going to Barranquilla this year?
I love
Remember
that.
that this year we are having, here we are. Let me show you here. Teachers, remember that to win this, you need to be in the room. So next month, we will be having Dr. Astrid Nunez, who's going to tell us a little bit about how to construct a critical reflective practice. And she's going to tell us about her personal journey. Remember that we are inviting you to our 15th National and 5th International Asocopia for La Alta Conference in Barranquilla, Democracy and Language Education, Teaching and Assessing for Social Justice. And since we know that you are looking forward to go, we close our forum at 5:50 as promised. This is the forum. This is where all the names are. We just copy them here. And Amanda, do you think that the first person on the wheel is going to get the pass or the third one?
Ooh, let's go with the first.
The first? Okay.
Wow.
So I love giveaways. I love giveaways.
En Barranquilla me quedo. We're going to
Barranquilla me
Barranquilla.
quedo, the very popular song says. And here we go. Let's see who's the winner for a free pass. Remember that you must be in the room. And the free pass as an attendee to Barranquilla goes to Cristina. So Cristina, congratulations. You are our guest. Please make sure we are going to send you all the information and the mail that you register in the form. Amanda, we cannot thank you enough for having you here with us today. It was awesome to have you. It's been an opportunity for our teachers to realize that this is happening in the world languages world all around the globe, not only for English teachers here in Colombia, but also world languages in general. Thank you everybody for joining us. We're going to see more of this in our YouTube channel. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Follow
Thank
us in
you.
social media.
Thank you,
Lots of
Amanda.
surprises coming.
Thank you. Christina, could you stay? We need her information,
I
right?
already have it in the form, Clau.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, everybody. Bye-bye. See you. See you
Bye.
next month. Bye, Amanda. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Amanda. Amazing.